Thaddeus Blackwood stood frozen in front of the monitor, as if his body had forgotten how to move. On the dim, greenish footage from the night vision camera, his 10-year-old son Danny was dancing. Yes, dancing, clumsily, but dancing, balancing on his skinny legs. Beside him moved the graceful silhouette of a woman. The nurse Thaddeus had hired not long ago. The father's heart pounded wildly. He couldn't believe his eyes. Just recently, Danny had barely been able to move, too weak even to lift his head from the pillow. The doctor had told him there was no hope, the boy's days were numbered. Yet here he was now, swaying to the music. The room on the screen was dim, but the camera clearly captured the touching scene. Nurse Cassidy, barefoot on the rug, gently held the boy's hands, helping him keep his balance. She seemed to be softly humming along with the tune playing faintly from her phone, because Danny was chuckling, quietly, but joyfully, trying his best to move with the rhythm. Thaddeus heard the laughter through the speaker. It took his breath away, a wave of joy catching him completely off guard. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he quickly wiped them away with the back of his hand, not taking his gaze off the screen. For the first time in what felt like forever, Thaddeus felt hope. He was overcome with happiness, but he couldn't explain how this was possible, what had sparked this sudden strength in his boy. A few weeks earlier, he had been on the verge of despair. His only son, Daniel, was slowly wasting away from a severe illness. After his wife's passing, Thaddeus had raised the boy alone, trying to give him everything. But no amount of money could fight the disease. The best doctors simply shrugged. Danny grew weaker with every passing day. He used to be a lively, energetic child. Thaddeus still remembered playing soccer with him in the backyard just a year ago, Danny chasing the ball, shouting joyfully, "Dad, catch the pass." Now, that same boy could barely whisper. Most of the time, he slept or lay drained of all energy, hooked up to IVs. Seeing his son like this was pure agony for Thaddeus. His new wife, Brittany, had grown tired of the situation rather quickly. She avoided the boys' room altogether and got irritated whenever Danny's condition forced them to cancel social plans. Brittany was much younger than Thaddeus and clearly felt little attachment to her stepson. One day, Thaddeus overheard her on the phone with a friend. "Living with a sick kid is torture," she said. "I just wish it would all be over." Those words cut through him like a knife. He pretended not to hear, but something inside him changed that day. He began to emotionally detach from Brittany. When Danny's condition declined so badly that he needed round-the-clock care, Brittany flatly refused to stay by his side. "Just hire someone. It's not like you can't afford it," she said coldly. Thaddeus clenched his jaw and stayed silent. The last thing he needed was a fight. He could afford to hire the best nurse available, but deep down, he had hoped his wife would show a shred of concern. She didn't. That's how Cassidy came into their lives. A woman in her early 40s, with kind eyes and a calm, steady smile. Thaddeus chose her from several candidates, trusting a gut feeling. Cassidy's resume included years of caring for terminally ill children. She'd worked in a hospice, and before that, a children's hospital. In the interview, she spoke plainly and sincerely, not trying to impress, but radiating confidence. Something told Thaddeus, this was the person his son needed. Cassidy got to work right away. She spoke to Danny, read him books, gave him gentle massages. At first, he barely responded, lying still and drained. But after a few days, Thaddeus noticed a change. When Cassidy entered the room, Danny no longer turned to the wall, he watched her and even gave a faint nod. That tiny spark was enough to stir a fragile hope in the father's heart. "You don't need to sing to him," Brittany said coldly one evening, finding Cassidy humming a lullaby by Danny's bedside. "You're here to follow medical instructions, not indulge your maternal instincts." Cassidy lowered her gaze and didn't respond. But after Brittany walked out, she quietly finished the last lines of the lullaby, gently stroking Danny's hand. He squeezed her fingers. It was clear he liked the singing. In just a couple of weeks under her tender care, Danny, against all odds, had begun to grow ever so slightly stronger. Cassidy had her own little tricks. She brought fragrant muffins to his bedside. Placed wildflowers in a vase by the window. Anything to stir the boy's interest. These things weren't in her job description, she did them from the heart, as if caring for her own child. Thaddeus knew then he had chosen well. Danny gravitated toward Cassidy. More than once, Thaddeus found her asleep in a chair beside his son's bed, still holding the boy's hand in hers. Those moments brought both warmth and sorrow. Warmth from seeing his son receive the kindness he desperately needed, and sorrow from knowing his stepmother hadn't once come to visit. It was a stranger who did everything, not for money, but out of love. That evening, Thaddeus had been working in his office when he noticed movement on the nursery monitor. On screen, Danny and Cassidy were up to something, and Thaddeus immediately switched to the live feed. There she was, helping the boy sit up in bed, whispering something encouraging. Then she gently lifted him under the arms. Thaddeus gasped. The doctors had strictly forbidden Danny to stand up due to his extreme weakness. He nearly rushed into the room, but froze, watching instead. Cassidy was incredibly gentle. She placed the boy's bare feet on the soft rug beside the bed. Danny clung to her tightly, staying upright only because she was holding him. With one hand, Cassidy tapped her phone screen, and a soft melody began to play. Then, she started to sway, just a step to the left, then to the right, guiding the boy with her. He's dancing. Thaddeus realized, holding his breath. His son was trying to move his legs, the same legs he couldn't feel just days ago. Slowly, Danny shuffled across the rug. The camera zoomed in on his face, pale, focused, but alive. For the first time in ages, there was a spark in his eyes. It was as if, just for a moment, the illness and pain didn't exist. He was simply dancing with Cassidy. Then, something almost miraculous happened. Danny let out a faint, raspy whisper, "More." Thaddeus flinched. His son had asked to keep going. This same boy who could barely move, who had barely spoken for weeks. "All right, let's go one more round," Cassidy replied warmly. They made a few more slow rotations. But soon, the boy's strength gave out, and he slumped heavily in her arms. Thaddeus almost bolted for the door, but Cassidy calmly eased him into the wheelchair that was already nearby and offered him water, gently holding him close. "You did amazing," she whispered, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "You're a hero, you know that. You stood longer than ever. And tomorrow, we'll do even more. You'll see." Danny was breathing hard, but a faint smile lingered on his lips. He rested his head on her shoulder, exhausted, but content. Cassidy gently rubbed his back. Tears welled in Thaddeus's eyes. He had nearly lost hope of ever seeing his son smile again. And now, here he was, smiling, arms draped around the nurse's neck. Snapping out of it, Thaddeus leapt from his chair. He needed to see it with his own eyes, to be there. As he reached the nursery door, he slowed down, afraid to disturb the moment. Peeking inside, he saw Danny already back in bed, and Cassidy adjusting the blanket. "What's going on in here?" Thaddeus asked quietly as he stepped across the threshold. His voice trembled with emotion. Cassidy turned and froze, like a schoolgirl caught doing something she shouldn't. "Mr. Blackwood?" She began, caught off guard. "Dad, we danced," Danny said softly. Thaddeus rushed to the bed and dropped to his knees, searching his son's face. "You danced? Buddy, how?" "I wanted to," the boy breathed, blinking quickly. "Cassidy helped me. Don't be mad at her." Cassidy lowered her gaze, bracing for a reprimand. But Thaddeus covered his son's hand with his own and looked up at her. "Mad? I ought to be thanking you." Cassidy blinked in surprise. Thaddeus's eyes were glistening with tears, but he was smiling, genuinely, the way he hadn't smiled in a long time. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know what it means to see him on his feet. It's a miracle." Cassidy smiled warmly, relief washing over her. "It's Danny who deserves the credit. He gave it everything he had." "I didn't do great," the boy murmured, glancing shyly at his father's hands. "You were incredible," Thaddeus said firmly, stroking his son's hair. "And tomorrow, I want you to show me again. Deal?" Danny's eyes lit up. "Really? You want to see?" "Absolutely, son." Thaddeus straightened up and suddenly kissed his forehead. "I'm so proud of you." Danny beamed. He had missed his father's praise so much during his illness. Cassidy, trying not to interrupt their moment, quietly gathered used tissues and the empty cup. "Cassidy," Thaddeus suddenly said, his voice calm but serious. "You knew Brittany had strictly forbidden lifting Danny from the bed, didn't you?" The nurse nodded, letting out a slow breath. "I did. But the new approach has been showing progress, and today Danny asked to stand. He wanted it so badly, so I took a chance. I'm sorry if I broke the rules." "I'm glad you did," Thaddeus said with a tired smile. "To be honest, that was a foolish rule." He shook his head, seeing the confusion on her face. "From now on, please, follow only the doctor's guidance, and your own instincts. No more absurd restrictions that only make things worse." Cassidy could hardly believe what she was hearing. "So, you're not angry?" Cassidy asked softly. "No," Thaddeus said, his voice steady. "I'm grateful. You gave my son something more important than medicine, hope." She glanced away, embarrassed, and Thaddeus thought she looked, at that moment, like a tired guardian angel. Her face was flushed from dancing, a few strands of hair had come loose, and beads of sweat shimmered on her forehead. She had given everything she had to this child, and that, to him, was priceless. "You should rest, Cassidy," he said gently. "You've been with him all evening, I doubt you even had dinner." "Honestly, probably not," she admitted, rubbing her stiff neck. "If you could stay with Danny for a bit, I'll step away for a moment." "Of course. Go ahead," Thaddeus nodded. Once the door closed behind the nurse, he turned back to his son. Danny was still looking at him with sparkling eyes, though his lids had grown heavy with sleep. "Dad," the boy whispered. "I'm here," Thaddeus said, sitting beside the bed again. "You were amazing today. You know that?" "I wanted to," the boy murmured sleepily. "I had a dream the other night. Mom told me, dance for me, my little bunny. So I asked Cassidy. She's really nice. I like being with her. She kind of reminds me of Mom." Thaddeus's lips trembled. Goosebumps prickled his skin. His son had dreamed of his mother, and after that, he'd wanted to stand. Could it be a sign? Who could say? He gently squeezed his son's small hand. "I think your mom would be so proud of you." Danny was already drifting off, a faint smile still on his lips. Thaddeus sat quietly for another half hour, watching him sleep peacefully. The memory of the dance scene played over and over in his mind. He wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. A feeling stirred in his chest, one he had been afraid to believe in too soon. Hope. But there was still a shadow to cast out. Brittany's coldness. The moment he thought of his wife, Thaddeus's expression darkened. How much longer would she poison the peace of this house? He remembered her sharp remarks, the way she looked at his sick child with disdain, and his hands clenched into fists. Enough was enough. That night, Thaddeus confronted her directly. He told her he was filing for divorce. It turned into a screaming match. Brittany snapped, yelling that she wasn't going to waste her youth beside a dying child. Those cruel words were the final straw. Thaddeus ordered her out of the house, immediately. Insulted and enraged, Brittany slammed the door behind her and left their estate forever. Once her footsteps faded into the distance, Thaddeus sat down and covered his face with his hands. He didn't feel sorry for her, or for the end of their marriage. All that mattered now was Danny's well-being. Everything else was irrelevant. By morning, news of Brittany's sudden departure had spread through the house. The household staff whispered among themselves, but deep down, they all agreed, it was long overdue. Cassidy, when she found out the stepmother was no longer in the home, simply nodded with quiet understanding. She'd seen it before, had spent years protecting vulnerable patients from cold-hearted relatives. Sometimes, separation was the only remedy. With Brittany gone, the atmosphere in the house lightened. Danny no longer hesitated to ask for help, for water, to roll over in bed. He no longer feared a scowl or a sigh of annoyance. Everything had changed. Thaddeus, meanwhile, put his business on the back burner. It barely mattered to him now. He spent most of his time at Danny's side, holding meetings at home and setting up his laptop right by the boy's bed when he slept. Every pound Danny gained, every minute of energy he showed, felt like a small miracle. Months passed. Then came the words they had dreamed of hearing. Doctors confirmed that Daniel was no longer in immediate danger. The illness had retreated. A long recovery still lay ahead, but the worst was over. A year later, Daniel returned to school. Who would have believed it? Cassidy still lived in the house, but no one called her nurse anymore. She was Daniel's companion, and simply part of the family. After the boy's recovery, she stayed not because of a paycheck, but because her heart told her to. Thaddeus made sure she was compensated generously, though she never asked for more. Through months of struggle, the three of them had become incredibly close. The divorce with Brittany had finalized, and she vanished from their lives for good. Thaddeus gave her nothing but contempt, and not a cent more than required. She left without even saying goodbye to Danny. But the boy never asked about her. He had Cassidy now, and hugged her every day like a second mother. Sometimes, looking at his son, Thaddeus wondered, what made the difference? The treatment hadn't changed drastically. The doctors were the same. The diagnosis remained terrifying. But when Cassidy entered their home, something came with her, something they had all been missing. Hope. Warmth. And the belief that things could get better. That kind of human connection isn't written on prescriptions, but without it, even the most expensive treatment might fail. Cassidy had years of medical experience, of course, and that mattered. But more than that, she surrounded Danny not just with care, but with safety. Thaddeus didn't downplay the role of medicine. But now, he understood, sometimes, what a child needs most isn't to know they're being treated, but to feel someone is fighting for them. And maybe that, above all, was the missing piece. Love. Kindness. Devotion. They had beaten the illness. And despair. The road ahead would still be long, filled with physical therapy and follow-ups, but Thaddeus no longer feared for his son or for himself. Because now, they were a real family. Unconventional, maybe. But real. And every new day in their home began with a smile. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone close to you. Leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. And let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? We'd love to know.